morning. My name is Brian McLean. I'm the Public Works Superintendent for the City of Vacaville, and I am overseeing the City Coach Transit Program and have been since 2005. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is one of our many public outreach meetings that we've been conducting over the last couple weeks. Why are we here? Every 3 to 4 years, City Coach goes out and we essentially do a sample, a testing of the market. We want to talk to the people. We want to talk to the constituents and the riders of City Coach, potential riders of City Coach, etc. All in an effort to try to understand, how's the system doing? What do you like? What do you don't like? What do you like to see change? You know, do we want to operate longer? Do we want to operate earlier? Do we want to put Sunday service out there? We want input. That's what really this is. And it's because every 3 to 4 years, it's a good idea to do that sampling, because we've got people that are moving into the town, moving out of the town, they're moving jobs, they're changing jobs, their travel patterns are changing. And so this allows us to be able to really get an idea of what's going on out there in terms of public transit, and how can we make this system better? That's really what it comes down to. And then you are the integral piece of the puzzle here. We need your input. This doesn't work unless we get your input. So get your notebooks out, be prepared to provide input. This is your chance. This is really your opportunity to tell us what you'd like to see and how you'd like to see this thing improve. We are all ears. Selena is here from LSC Consulting, and we've hired LSC starting back in June of last year. We've been working on this project, so it's a long-term effort. Selena is going to take it away here and go through some of the data and research that's been going on over the last several months. So again, thank you for coming. Please don't hesitate to provide that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So as Brian mentioned, I'm Selena McKinney with LSC Transportation Consultants, and we are a transportation planning firm based in Denver and Colorado Springs and Tahoe City, and I myself live in the Sacramento area. And we did start this project in June, as Brian mentioned. The first thing that we did is we looked at all the demographics on the ground. We looked at where the growth is in the city. We looked at travel patterns, commute patterns from the census, and that gave us kind of a base of what you have in your city. We also talked to people, stakeholders, about what the transportation issues are, and we produced what we called our working paper 1, and that looked at the demand for transit. Then we looked at the routes and all the detail of the ridership and how much each route segment produces in terms of ridership and fares and how much it costs. So that tells us the performance of the existing system. So we take all that data, and we produced a report that was our second working paper. So, and then when we presented that to the public, we had some outreach meetings where we got more input on what people were concerned about and what their needs were, and we did surveys on the buses to ask people what their needs were. So all that information from the public, from the riders, from the data, helped us decide what ideas we should evaluate. And that's what we've done now, is we have our third working paper, which is all the different ideas we've come up with. And these ideas are all individual right now, but what we'll do next is we'll put them together as a final plan. And then we'll have it up one more time for evaluation, or for feedback. So before we can look at the future, we need to look at what is currently available. And this is an example of what the existing service is. Those are the 6 routes that we have. But these are our routes 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8. And this represents how frequent the service is. These are all on 30-minute frequency. That means at every bus stop, the bus is there every 30 minutes, and the Route 1 is every 60 minutes. It goes from 6 in the morning till 6:37 in the evening. And that's the existing ridership, existing schedule. This represents the Saturday service, which is a little shorter than weekday service, and there is no Sunday service. And what you can tell from that is that the service is very even throughout the system. Only Route 1 has 60-minute, but the rest has half-hour service all day long. And yet Route 5 and 6 are the ones with the highest ridership, so maybe those are the ones that are most appropriate to be 30-minute headways. And this is the route system. We have Route 1, which starts at the transportation center and goes out past the backside of the outlets on Burton, out to Leisure Town. All this is served on demand. People can call ahead and ask the bus to come off the route and pick them up. And then it goes out up to Kaiser. Route 2 leaves the transportation center and comes down and goes straight out to the transportation plaza and does a loop around and goes and serves western Vacaville and comes back, and then it goes up and it serves this whole area of Browns Valley. Route 4 heads out Highway 505 and straight up to serve the college, the community college, Gen Tech, and Kaiser, and then comes back along Orange Drive and back to the transportation plaza, transportation center. Route 5 is our meat and potatoes. It's the route with the most ridership, and it starts at the transportation center, does a loop around the outlet area, and comes down, serves all the way down into South Vacaville along Alamo and back up to the transportation or the transit plaza, and then comes back on the same route. So that serves a big area, a lot of residents down here, a lot of commercial here and here. And Route 6 comes up through the outlet area, goes on Burton, out Nut Tree, on Monte Vista, serves the lower half of Browns, or the Markham area, and out to the Transit Plaza, and then back again on the same route. Route 8 serves the southeast area of Vacaville. It comes down, serves the schools here, goes out and does a big loop in the southeast area down here. So is our furthest south reaching route, comes back up to the Transit Plaza. So those are all the routes that we have currently, and that's the span of service. The ridership, right now you carry 430,000 passengers a year, so that's how many times somebody steps up on the bus, another 16,000 on the dial-a-ride. You can see on the top right there, that's the graph that shows the ridership by month, and there's a big dip in the summertime, and that top route is Route 5, and down at the bottom you have 1 and 4, which have low ridership. And then you also have on the lower graph that shows the ridership by day of the week. And during the weekday, it's pretty even. You can see this is weekday ridership. This is Saturday ridership. It's a lot lower on Saturdays, as low as a third to half. And overall, if you look at the whole transit system, Saturday ridership is 38% of weekday ridership. So all of this is telling us the service is even, but the ridership is not, so maybe we should look at some changes in how that's addressed. This shows the service area. The red line up there is the city limits, and the gray shaded area shows everything that's within a quarter mile of a route, and that's what we consider being served by transit. So the area is pretty well served. There's a few areas that have no service down here in the southeast, where there's some development, and out here, this area is not very well served up here, and then up by Kaiser and the industrial area, there's some that's not served. But all this area in central Vacaville and the commercial core is pretty well served. So when we take all that into consideration, and we also look at some of the things we need to to think about for transit planning. One thing that we need to consider is for every dollar we spend on transportation, on transit services, we need to get 20 cents back on through fares. So that's called our 20% fare box ratio, and that's what's required for funding. So we need to have that amount come back from fares, and we're just above that now. And what that tells us is if we take something away, we can add something, but we can't just add service without adjusting things. So we don't have a lot of room to expand, but we need to make the dollars count as much as we can. Other things to consider, ridership on Route 1 is poor. It only has 3.4 riders per hour, and that is 71% lower than the system average. But we also have a caveat to that. If you didn't have that call-a-ride area, you'd probably have to have it be on dial-a-ride, which would be more expensive than the fixed route. On-time performance problems. We have a lot of on-time performance issues on routes 2, 5, and 6, particularly 5 and 6. And we also need to address the change in the school bell times. Researchers have found that kids do better if they start later in the day. Teenage brains don't turn on until 9 a.m. or later. So they're going to adjust the schools to account for that. And that means we have to figure that out for our transit service. And we also need to consider the development in new areas. There's a lot of growth up in the northeast and down in the southeast. So what we're looking at now is route modifications to routes 2 and 8, route 4, and then some changes around the outlet area to see if we can speed that up so that we don't have so many late buses. And then we're also looking at service frequency modifications. Can we change how often we ride or we send out the buses, and maybe we can go later in the evening if we reduce some of the routes to 60 minutes instead of 30 minutes. Or maybe we could have Sunday service. So we looked at all of these things. And as I said, these are all looked at individually. Later we'll come up with a plan that puts them all together. So the Route 2 and 8 modifications that we're looking at, the black line up there is what we're proposing as a new, or what we've evaluated as a new Route 2, and it just goes around the plaza, Transit Plaza, up north of Vacaville High School, out to Alamo, and then back up Merchant to the Transit Plaza. And it would just do that loop every half hour. And it wouldn't go up to Browns Valley or Markham area at all. What we would do instead is send a tripper up there. So this whole area right now is served every hour, and we only have a few riders per hour or less that use that service. So what we're proposing is this brown route would be operated just during the school peaks. So you wouldn't have that Route 2 on an hourly basis anymore. It would only go out there on the, during the school morning and afternoon peaks. And we're also proposing to change Route 8 to just go down to this area, up past Wilsey Wood High School, and back to the Transit Plaza. And that would still be done on every half hour. And then to cover this area, we would have a new hour-long route from the Transportation Plaza Center down, serving this great big green loop, and that would go further south and serve some of this area that's not served now. And although we'd lose some coverage in this area, and we would send out this blue route just during the school hours to pick up the kids during the school times. And we feel that better matches what the demand is out there. When we send this out every half hour, we don't get very good ridership. And we think an hour service would be appropriate for that area. So the 2 school trippers and the new Route 8 and the new Route 2 is what we would change those services too. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you have any questions on those? So basically, that would save us $141,000 because we are reducing, we're using one less bus to do it. And it would add 11,000 passenger trips. So you're saving money, adding ridership. And with that, you can do something else. And this just shows those peaks there are the school times. So you can see the ridership really isn't supported all day long. It's really supported during those peaks. And that's why we think we should do these trippers. The other thing about the trippers is you can adjust them with those bell times, or you can make them match the school bus times or school bell times a lot better, and it gives you flexible service. The Route 4 modifications, what we're suggesting for Route 4 is to serve that new area of growth up in the northeast area. We would go still up to the community college, but instead of dropping down to go to Gen Tech, we'd go north and up into that area where that green shading is and go along Crescent Drive so that we can serve all that area of residents. And then we drop down into Kaiser, do our loop around, and then go out the same way that we have been going out and return on Orange Drive. This doesn't have a big cost impact. It's only adding a little bit of mileage, so it'd be about $900 per year, not a big deal. But it would increase ridership, we estimate, by about 2,800 because you are serving a whole new neighborhood within a quarter mile of the route up there. It does, so it does increase access to 240 residents, but it does mean a longer walk for people who are at Gen Tech or Kaiser. Right now the bus goes down from the front of Kaiser and over to the clinic, but people would just get one stop at Kaiser. We're also looking at revisions to the outlet area. This is routes 5, 6, and 1, and I probably need to get up here again to show you this. But the solid lines represent the existing routes, and the blue the dashed lines represent the changes. So right now, Route 1, for example, goes out along Ulatis and out to Burton and Nut Tree to Yellowstone. And what we're proposing is that it would go up on Harbison Drive, out Nut Tree Parkway, down Helen Power, out Burton. And that would serve more of the outlet area. Right now, Route 1 has plenty of time in its running time, so we could use it to serve that area, and that would allow us to move routes 5 and 8 off of this busy area that has so much congestion. So Route 5, which currently goes up this direction and all the way around, gets stuck in traffic here. Instead, we'd send it out Ulatis, up Burton, and out Nut Tree. What happens though is Walmart and Sam's are right here. They'd have to catch the bus. The people who wanted to access that would have to either take Route 1 or catch the bus or drop off right here. And that's a bit more of a walk for people if they're disabled. So that is one concern, but it would save about 5 minutes, and we could use those 5 minutes in that route, which gets behind. Route 6 goes up in this same area that Route 5 does, and what we're proposing is it would just go up Harbison and out Nut Tree and turn left here. So it also would no longer serve Walmart and Sam's directly, but it would be able to turn left here. This is an uncontrolled left, so it would really speed that up and give you another 5 minutes on that route as well. So it saves time. Time is a big issue on those routes, but it might be less convenient for some people trying to get to some of those areas. We're also looking at, which came out of this meeting, so we don't have the map of it yet or the numbers on it, but we are looking at 20-minute frequency on Route 5 or different ways that we might better serve that area. A few things that I should mention that we did look at. We looked at the outlets having a circulator bus and then just everything pulsing in and out because there's a lot of demand in the outlets area. But that would add about $200,000 per year, and it really wouldn't increase the ridership that much. So we dismissed that. We just wanted to make sure we looked at all options. We also looked at service to the Fairfield Vacaville train station because that is something that people said they'd like to see, and the train's new here. The train station just opened in the fall. That would cost about $130,000 to do because none of the existing routes have the time to go down and do it, so we'd have to add a route. But one of the bigger issues with that is that the trains come as early as 5:30 in the morning and 11:30 at night, and they're at uneven times of the day, so it would be really hard to serve it on a regular schedule. So we think maybe a subsidy of Lyft or Uber or something like that might be more effective. We also looked at options for reducing service frequency because, as I mentioned, everything's served evenly right now. If we cut some of the routes down to 60 minutes instead of 30 minutes, we might be able to use that money to either go later in the evening or have higher frequency somewhere else. So this is a pretty detailed, I won't get into all the details, but this shows all of the different options for doing that. And we looked at, okay, what if we reduce Monday through Saturday service from 30 minutes to 60 minutes on routes 2, 4, and 8? Those are our lower ridership routes. Maybe we could just do hourly service on those. It would save $262,000 after you take away the fares. And it would meet, everything that's in the green meets performance standards. So we want to have more than 12 passengers an hour, and we want to have a cost of less than $5 per passenger trip. And since these are negatives, the opposite works here, where you want the lower number on the can I do a point here? You want these numbers to be lower and these numbers to be higher, the dollars numbers to be higher. So all of these meet the standard. Our next, after reducing frequency Monday through Saturday, we looked at, well, what if we just did it on Saturdays, not every weekday? And you would still save $67,000 per year. You would lose 7,300 passenger trips per year, but that it performs pretty reasonably well. And then, as we saw also, the ridership is a lot lower in the summer, so what if we reduced frequency in the summer to hourly on routes 2 and 8? So these are all the things that we've evaluated. We also looked at extending service in the evening by an hour on weekdays, or by up till 9 o'clock on weekdays, or Sunday service. And these also are, you can see the performance standard there. They don't meet the performance standard for most of these except on routes 5 and 6. So maybe we could extend just those 2 routes in the evenings. When we looked at the numbers here, the impacts on the ridership, you can see that the extending to 9 p.m. in the weekends gives you the most increase in ridership, followed by Route 2 and 8 revisions. Oh, wait a minute. 1 hour weekday evening service gives you 16,300 passenger trips. Sunday service gives you 21,000. The hourly weekday on Route 2 would reduce by 15,300. So you can see which of these are better performing and which are not as good performing. But when you look at the costs, so you have Route 2 and 8 give you 11,300 and save you money, 145,000 saved. Route 9, extending till 9 p.m. in the evenings gives you 37,800 passenger trips, but it's going to cost you $140,000. So we look at all these types of performances and we decide which ones are the best options. And routes 2 and 8 are a clear advantage. They increase ridership and decrease the costs. Route 4 also increases ridership without much cost. The routes around the route changes around the mall would improve ridership a little bit because they do reduce the time, and that makes it much more convenient for people. On the other options for increasing the ridership, the most effective is extending the span of service by 1 hour, and that gives you 10.9 passengers per hour. So that, and it costs just $3.14 per passenger trip, which is less than our 5 standard. And among the increasing the span of service, increasing routes 5 and 6 on that's a better option than all the other routes. And of the alternatives, reducing frequency to hourly, reducing Saturday service, and service in the summer on routes 2 and 8 both yield a substantial cost savings at a relatively low cost, low loss of ridership. So those are our best options. We also looked at some changes in the bus stop locations. That's kind of detailed. I won't get into that too much with you right now unless you have questions about that. We do look at putting 12 new bus stop shelters in and moving some of the existing shelters with low ridership to new locations. And also a pedestrian walkway. Right now, the transportation center is behind all that shopping area, but you can't get there because there's a fence on one side and a wall on the other. So we're saying, well, what if we put a walkway there, and that can give people access directly from the transportation center. We did look at increases to fares because, as we said, we have to we have to take in 20% of our revenue through fares. So we looked at these increases to the single fares and the passes. So from going from $1.50 to $1.75 on the base fare, the youth fare would increase from $1.25 to $1.50, and we'd increase the passes by 17% as well. We also looked at just raising the one-way fares and not changing the passes so that people would be encouraged to use passes more, and that speeds up boarding. We also looked at eliminating the transfers. Right now you have to pay 15 cents for a transfer, and that's kind of inconvenient for people to carry 15 cents. So we could offer the transfers still, but without the charge, or we could eliminate the fares, or the transfers altogether. This, again, is our performance analysis of that. I don't want to get into detail, but what you can see is the only one that really meets our standard is if we eliminated, or if we provided the fares, the transfers for free. So that's something we might consider. We looked at some marketing improvements. City Bus is going to be getting AVL, which is automatic vehicle location, and that would allow them to have an app on the phone where you can actually follow the buses on your smartphone and see where they are. That really makes it more convenient for people. Systems that have that really like it. And we're also looking at showing the individual stops on the maps here so that people can find every little detailed stop, or they can go online and find those. And that helps people with their trip planning as well. So that's kind of the highlight of our analysis. So I also want to encourage you to, if you would go online and take our survey and add your comments. It presents all of this information basically on an online format and asks you to comment on whether you like it, whether you don't, what your concerns are. So we'd really encourage you and anybody else you know who takes the bus to fill out the surveys. So the surveys are also, if you lost your paper, you could go to citycoach.com and there's links there. There's my information here, and it's also down here. If you think of any other comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you.